Well, David Perry is the Vice President of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. He is in London for the NATO summit. He joins us now. David Perry, good to see you again. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
NATO's celebrating its 70th anniversary, but give me a sense of how much celebrating you think will be taking place at this summit.
Well, I hope a lot because there's a lot of reasons to celebrate. This has been probably the most successful alliance in world history in terms of doing what it was intended to, providing for the security and the defense of the constituent allies. But I think that there's a significant degree of concern heading into this that President Trump will be President Trump. And then, as we saw in the last couple of weeks, that there's also some concerns about the French president as well as the one from Turkey. So there's some significant concern about this potentially being derailed, but certainly it's an alliance that has a lot to celebrate on its 70th anniversary.
What are the key issues that have raised these serious questions about NATO's future?
So there's a few different ones. So from the American perspective, certainly the burden sharing and how much each ally is contributing to the collective defense and financially. Increasingly, we're seeing disputes between the French in terms of the role between the continental allies and the transatlantic ones, and about what exactly the alliance leadership structure looks like. Also seeing some challenges that are in part related to that about different views and attitudes towards Russia, which for several allies is the key security and defensive concern and the whole raison d'etre for the alliance, but for others less so. And then I think there's been an extension of a division that's emerged along the southern flank of the alliance and those countries that face the Mediterranean that have been dealing with those really pressing migration issues and terrorist concerns coming out of the North African region and the Middle East. And that's really manifested over the last couple of months with what Turkey has done on the alliance's southeastern frontier and concerns about where exactly Turkey fits as an ally or whether or not it still does.
Right. In your view, are these issues that the alliance can resolve, or are these cracks going to get deeper?
Some of them are trickier than others. Certainly there's been different, I think over time, different perspectives from different allies about how much of which particular security threats have been more or less important. So I don't think that's all that new. And certainly Turkey's been a bit of a problematic issue. So in the past, in some other respects, but I think it's becoming a bit more pointed right now where you've got an ally that had been looking to buy frontline NATO standard equipment, and particularly for air defense and air fighters, but now has made some other options. They're not allowed to go through, at least temporarily, with the F-35 purchase they've been underway with. And then they're now in the process of buying some of the Russian government's frontline anti-aircraft defensive systems, which is a significant problem for the alliance to integrate that. That's a bit unique. So there's some of these issues are more of a unique challenge for these circumstances than some that have been dealt with in the past.
All right. Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has been expressing his enthusiastic support for NATO, but what can he expect to hear at the summit about Canada's role in the alliance?
It would probably depend on who he's talking to. Certainly, I think he can expect to hear from President Trump that Canada needs to step up and spend more and do more. I think we got a flavor of that in the last couple of weeks, some statements from some senior American officials doing more, particularly in a North American context in our north. I think from the other members of the alliance, there's an opportunity to be more collaborative. There's certainly some common ground from some about a need to enhance what we're doing in the north, but without the kind of pejorative view that the Americans have expressed publicly and less diplomatically than previous administrations have about how much weight Canada is carrying. And I think there's also some scope to have some discussions with some of the allies about the future of some of the international nuclear agreements, with the United States having withdrawn from the INF Treaty.
And how will Justin Trudeau defend? I mean, if he does hear from Donald Trump and perhaps from others that, Canada is one of those 22 of the 29 that isn't spending 2% of its GDP on defense. How does Justin Trudeau defend Canada's military spending?
So I think you would do two things based on the way the government's approached this in the past. One is to point to Strong, Secure, Engage, the defense policy they published in 2017, which has at least moved us in the right direction on spending, albeit if you look at the numbers underpinning that policy, it's going to be temporary because that as the spending will actually start to decline after about 2027. And then I think the other thing that the Prime Minister will do, as Canadians have in the last number of years, is point to the fact that the alliance isn't just all about the cash you contribute. It's also the capability that you can generate from your military with that spending, and then what you do with it. And the Canadian arguments have long been that even though we don't spend that much by the particular comparative measure of the share of GDP, we do actually spend the sixth most in the alliance. So we do spend a lot in real terms, and we do a lot with that. We make meaningful contributions to the alliance, contribute in all the exercises and operations, and at least over the last decade or so, the troops that we do send are really empowered to be some of the real heavy hitters operationally.
We also expect to hear the U.S. at least raise the issue of China and a call for NATO partners to ban Huawei from their 5G networks. What does that mean for Canada, which is yet to decide whether to ban Huawei? What do you expect to hear?
Probably a similar version from the United States, reiterating what some senior officials had echoed, including the President's National Security Advisor at the Halifax International Security Forum, that Huawei participation in 5G is incompatible with being a Five Eye American ally. I think what the Prime Minister might find in London with the other 28 allies is a bit more breathing room, because there's more diversity, I think, of thought across the alliance, and not all of those allies are as integrated into the United States defense and national security apparatus as Canada is. So it's a little bit easier, I think, for some of them to have more leeway on some of these 5G issues, because they're not as tightly embedded as Canada is with the Americans on these types of network and security and intelligence sharing issues.
Let's finish on this. We've talked a little bit about the likely disruptions from Donald Trump, but some of the challenges beyond what Donald Trump has to say facing NATO. How do you see this summit ending?
Hopefully it ends with a nice family photo and everyone having had a meaningful conversation, rather than some of the open sniping and bickering that we've seen in the past. Certainly a lot to celebrate, and for Canada especially, this has been a cornerstone of our security and defense. So I think we would like to celebrate the last 70 years and look to the future in a positive way, and avoid some of the negative things that have come up, in particular from Washington.
All right. David Perry joining us from London tonight. David, always good to get your perspective. Thanks for your time today.
Great to talk to you.